Hi, I'm Robert Naini, your spray foam advisor, and the guy in the Hawaiian shirt. I wear the Hawaiian shirt as a symbol of freedom and flexibility, something that all business owners should want to achieve. And one of my goals is to help 100 spray foam business owners set up their business in a way that gets them that freedom and flexibility that they're looking for. This includes providing spray foam training, education, tips and tricks, business fundamentals, and even coaching and consulting services.
All right, so we're going to be talking about sales, how to close more sales to grow your business. So by a show of hands, how many people saw my presentation yesterday on systems? Just a couple of you, because I recognize some faces. And we're going to be talking a lot about that. And really the concept is how to apply systems to the sales process and create your own internal sales process if you don't already have one, or how to analyze your current sales process with my recommended sales process, and really the sales process I teach to my contractor clients. So first we need to recognize when we're involved in sales, the purpose of sales, when we're interacting with customers, why people make decisions. And who was in attendance for the general session yesterday? Because he had a very, very similar question right at the very beginning of his question or of his presentation. And it was about themselves, right? WIIFM, what radio station is that? What's in it for me? This is what they care about. They care about what's in it for them. And you have to be able to put yourself in your prospect shoes, in your customer shoes, when you're involved in these discussions to understand what they care about and why they make decisions. Typically, they do it for a couple of reasons. They do it to receive pleasure or to avoid pain, right? What types of examples might this be, right? Receiving pleasure might be to have the best. If they want the best possible building envelope, or the best possible insulation, or the best possible structure, these are reasons that they will get pride out of actually choosing to make a decision to work with you. What about some functional or economic benefit, right? How many times have we had homeowners make decisions to work with us because of the energy savings that they're going to receive on the property, right? That's because they get an economic benefit from the structure. Have you ever sold to someone whose primary concern was indoor air quality and comfort and the way the air on the inside was going to be taken care of, how it combines with the air management system? These are all functional benefits that allow them, whether they realize it or not, to receive some form of pleasure. This is why they're making a decision. However, one of the more powerful forms of decision making come from pain. They want to avoid some form of pain, right? They want to avoid health issues. They have a fear. They're concerned, right? They're concerned about what happens on the indoor environment and how it's going to be affected by the exterior environment and what changes it's going to cause to the structure. So fear is a huge motivator in making decisions. Design failures. If you've ever gotten easy jobs from architects or GCs because they had some major catastrophe on another project and your solution will avoid that from ever happening, what's a good example of that would be condensation on the interior skin of a metal building because they didn't insulate it, or they insulated it with an air permeable material when they had potato storage on the inside of that building, right? You get condensation that leads to rust and rot and deterioration of that building envelope. The builder, the architect is on the hook for that. That's a design failure. So if you've ever won easy jobs because of those types of conditions, that's the motivation for making that decision. So then we have to wonder, how do we incorporate these concepts into our sales process, into our sales pitch? It's also important to think about the psychology of buying. Understand that people love to buy, but they hate to be sold. So we want to have a conversation. We want to have a discussion. We want to engage with them in a way where they're hearing the benefits, they're hearing the value, they're hearing the things that are most important to them. And if we can do it, the best sales processes that I've ever seen, it makes it seem like it's the owner's idea. It's their idea to work with you. That's the best way that we can possibly leave that interaction. We don't always get that. It's not always that easy to hit that home run shot where they are coming up with the idea to work with you over everyone else. But that is where we get the best possible results. It's also important to understand that people buy based on emotion and then justify those decisions with logic later down the road. Now, what do I mean by this? They buy because they're concerned about their son or daughter who has asthma and has difficulty breathing, and they're worried about the indoor air quality on the inside of the structure, and they have the fear, and they have the concern, and all of these emotions associated with the indoor air quality of that environment. And only after the fact they have this fear and emotion and concern do they use logic to justify that decision. What logic are they going to use? What's the science and it's the logic that we give them, right? It's the air tightness of the building envelope. It's changing the dynamics of the building by using spray foam to encapsulate the structure. But we have to remember to give them both of these components. We have to remember to be able to tie in the emotional piece and then justify it with logic ourselves. Give them the emotional piece that ties to what they're concerned about, to why they're going to make a decision, to what they care about, and then justify that with logic. And that's typically the scientific piece. It's typically the benefits of what we're doing. It's typically the building science concepts behind how what we do changes the way their structure works. So we want to use these in tandem and not individually. This is a big, big mistake that I made early in my career in the industry, where as an engineer, my default was to just start rattling off building science benefits and all the ways structures would change and the way that what we're doing is so great for you. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, how could you possibly not make this decision? I don't understand how you even are hesitating. And the reason they hesitated is because I never got them to buy in emotionally. I never connected to what their actual concern was. And so oftentimes it would be that car salesman just dead stare, where the car salesman rattles off 33 features of this car. They haven't asked you a single question, and they have no idea what you're looking for. And so the response is just a blank stare because they're spewing too much information too fast, and you can't process it properly. Now, there is some bad news when it comes to selling. We have to be aware of this. Your customers do not want spray foam insulation, no matter what they tell you. Even if they call you and say, I want spray foam insulation, they think they want spray foam insulation, but they want it for a completely different reason. It's not spray foam that they're buying. What are they buying? What do they actually want? They want comfort. That's their desire. They want a comfortable structure, and they think it's possible spray foam can do that for them because of a referral or because of something they read somewhere or for some other reason. But they actually want comfort, or they want energy savings because they heard it from a neighbor, or they heard it from a friend, or they heard it from a radio ad. Or they want safety or good indoor air quality, or they want to minimize risk because they know condensation is a problem. These are reasons that customers buy advanced technologies to do special things in building envelopes and in their structures. It's not because they are so enamored with spray foam that they just have to have your spray foam insulation. That is not why they're buying. So we need to connect what we're selling and the process that we're using to sell to actually what their desires are and how we're going to close that deal. So choosing the best is something that I see a lot when it comes to architects and engineers. They always want to be on the cutting edge. When you're working with design professionals, when you're working with builders, they always want to talk about their structure being at the height of technology, being on the cutting edge, working with the best materials in the marketplace. And this is often a component that we can use when we're working with those design professionals, because that triggers some of the reasons they want to buy. Some of the reasons, why would they want this in their buying pattern? Because they want to be able to use this in their marketing communication to their customers. They want to be able to sell the best. They want to be able to offer the best. They want to offer value to their customers, and they do it by using the best materials in their construction process. So all of these focus on the sales concepts, but how do we systematize sales? How do we actually create a structure where you can have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 salesmen, and they all flow through the same process. They all take a lead through the exact same channels and on a journey to closing a deal. How do we do that? Well, we actually create a system, a sales system. We have to define the customer journey. What does the customer journey look like? How do we want our customers to move through our organization? What communication do we want them to receive at different points, at different touch points, at different communication points? How often do we want to be reaching them? We actually get to determine that by creating the customer journey and the sales process. And then we define the sales process. And why do we define the sales process? We define it so that our people, our internal personnel, have a guideline of what's expected of them. This is what you do first. This is what you do next. These are the questions you need to ask along the way. This is the purpose of this interaction. These are the ways to do this part of the business. This is what we want to accomplish with these prospects and customers for the purpose of closing more business. And this is how we do it in our business, in this organization. And you get to define that process. Now, I'm going to start covering an example, what I teach my clients. Your process, your customer journey doesn't have to look exactly like this. If you want it to, steal what I'm going to say. I will give it to you. Take it and use it for yourself. If you just want bits and pieces of it, that's fine too. You have to figure out how to create a good process that works for your business in your situation. So let's talk about the customer journey. What does the customer journey look like? What starts with prospects, right? People that don't know you, they don't know who you are, they don't know what you do. Maybe they've heard of you before, maybe they haven't, but they're all suspects. So suspects are all the potential people that might be in your market that might possibly come across any of your marketing, your advertising, your communication. And this is where your marketing meets your sales, is that once you do marketing, once people start to raise their hand, once they say, hey, I am actually interested in more information, they go from being a suspect now to being an inquiry. They have inquired upon your services, ideally for something that you've offered them. Ideally, it's done in such a way that you've offered them some information, you've offered them a free energy audit of their structure, or you've offered them a free estimate, or you've offered them maybe an energy handbook that they can download from your website if they sign up via email. Something of that nature. You're offering them some value. In response, they're giving you their contact information. And why do you want their contact information? Because you want to be able to contact them, right? You want to be able to follow up with them and create discussions. You want to be able to follow up and have that initial contact, find out what their issues are, find out what their process is, find out ask them questions, understand who they are, understand what they're looking for, why they're making decisions, what critical components of the discussion are actually going to cause them to make a decision. And then you're doing something in the form of an estimate in this industry, right? You're either going to do a takeoff or you're trying to find out what structure they have that you can actually impact with the building envelope. And hopefully between these two steps, you have enough information to be able to make them an offer of some kind with a compelling call to action and a close that makes them a new customer. Now, this is what the customer journey looks like from their perspective, right? From their perspective, they don't know who you are, then they ask about you, then you have some form of discussions that leads to interaction, and when they say yes, they become a new customer. Now, this is in the shape of a funnel. Why? Because it gets smaller as people go down this funnel. Why? Because some people are not a good fit for your business. They don't actually want what you have, or they're not going to make decisions for the reasons that people make decisions to do business with you. They want something else, and it's not what you offer. There's going to be several different reasons that customers leak out of this funnel as they move through this process. And it may be that you decide you don't want to do business with them for some reason. So as customers move through this process, they're moving through this path, and your sales team has to move through a sales process to help guide the customer along this journey. So this is your sales team's intent, goal, process, idea, or a methodology to move a customer through the customer journey. As I said, it starts out as a prospect, and then once they inquire, once they trade you contact information, once they give you information to reach them, now you have to reach out and create these discussions. And these discussions lead to an evaluation. And during this evaluation, you're asking questions, you're finding pain points, you're finding, are they going to make decisions based on pain? Are they going to make decisions based on fear? Are they going to make decisions based on benefits? What do they actually care about? You're learning about them in this process so that you can eventually provide a solution. And when you come to the table with your solution, my recommendation is that you start talking about the overall building envelope approach. This is what you have told us that your concern is indoor air quality because your child has asthma and breathing concerns. So indoor air quality is very important to you. Is that right? Yes. Great. We've tied in that emotional component. What we're going to do is we put a package together. We're going to offer you this building envelope package. And the solution, this building envelope package, is going to provide these benefits. That's the logic component that I mentioned earlier. Now, once we've provided these benefits, it just so happens the way we're going to do it is X, Y, and Z. This is what the building envelope looks like. Spray foam here, spray foam there, this air barrier here, this air barrier there. Here are the details of what we're actually going to do. Sign on the dotted line, right? So you go from what they care about, their indoor air quality issue or their energy savings concern, what they want. Then you tie that in with what you are going to do. You're going to provide a building envelope solution that's going to provide these benefits. And then you tie that into a close. So that's the sales close here. The solution is actually a methodology that ties what they told you to what the benefits you're going to provide, to the logic behind it, to a close at the end. And then they become a new customer and you serve that customer. Now we're going to dig through this sales process in a little bit more detail, and we're going to cover a lot of the stuff that I just talked about. So prospect, reach out, evaluate, solution, and serve. This is the sales process that I teach to my clients. And prospecting starts to reaching out to your market, right? This is where you're looking for potential opportunities. You're constantly networking. You're looking at your existing customers and trying to find other potential customers that look like them. You're identifying new contacts, gathering contact information along the way, building a database of contacts for your local market, and you're pouring leads into that funnel that we looked at before, right? You're maintaining contact, looking at a running list of your top targets. What do I mean by top targets? For every business in here, you have 1 or 2 or 3 markets that are better than everybody else, right? You might be best at residential retrofit constructing, your company, right? You might be best at new commercial buildings. Whatever's best for you, you should have a concerted effort of going after these top targets. You're not going to turn away other business from other markets that you can still make money on. But where you focus your efforts and what you do best, you should have a special sales process focused on those top targets. And so this process here, prospecting, can actually do more for your revenue as a salesperson, for your salespeople, than any other skill. Because if you're finding good prospects, if you're finding good quality contacts in the market that have a need, that meet your buying criteria, that meet your customer persona profiles, that actually look like your other customers, then you're going to close a higher percentage of these deals because they fit the mold that you're looking at. Think about it from another perspective. If you're really bad at prospecting and you think everybody is a customer, your closing rate is going to be very, very low. Why would that be? Because initially, right off the top, 30 to 40% of that everybody isn't even a real potential prospect because they don't even own a building, right? So everybody is not your target client. Everybody is not your target customer. You have specific targets, and prospecting, researching, gathering contact information, and understanding them can be one of the best techniques to actually closing a higher percentage of your sales, which makes you more efficient and more effective with limited resources, because we all have limited resources. Now we want to reach out. This phase is we're reaching out to the market. We're trying to understand what the market wants, what the market needs. We're reaching out to the team to understand we have a prospect in mind, we have a specific target. Who do we know in the market that knows them or understands them or knows about them? Who on our team knows them, understands them, knows about them? What information do we have? And then it's time to reach out to the prospect and start that contact, start that initial contact phase, that information gathering process. We make that initial contact to open the conversation, and we're either setting up a meeting. Whatever we do, we want to stand out from the crowd, right? We want to be different. We want to be memorable. We want to make sure that they know who we are and what we're trying to provide with some form of value. And once again, oftentimes in our industry, that value is a free estimate, right? Who all offers a free estimate? I'm going to guess most of you, right? Secret, it's not very different. Everybody in your market offers that free estimate. What can you do to stand out? What can you do to be different, to actually be memorable? Because if that prospect gets a call from 5 people all offering the same thing, nobody stood out, right? Can you be something different? Can you be a performance contractor, or can you be an energy auditor? Can you add a component to your business that offers a different level of value than everybody else in the market? So that you give them a reason to engage with you. You give them a reason to want to have that initial conversation, to want to go deeper in this relationship, to want to start to build a more defined relationship. Obviously, this is going to apply to people that you don't already know or don't already have business with or don't already do business with, right? These concepts are not necessarily going to apply to an organization that you've done business with for the past 3, 5, 10 years, unless they hire a new buyer in that position and this is somebody you don't know. You may have to go back to this part of the process, build this initial relationship when personnel gets revolved at one of your existing customers, right? You may have to restart this relationship with a new person every time that personnel changes. So you're going through this process to evaluate. You want to learn about the prospect, learn about them, their buying decisions, the reasons they buy, what the projects are actually doing, what their goals are, so that you can develop a relationship, so that you can provide some form of value deeper than just we are insulation guys that sell spray foam insulation. We want to ask questions. We want to understand who they are, what they do, gather information along the way so that we know their goals, their desires, their challenges, their obstacles. What can we do to solve these issues, right? I said they make decision based on 2 things, pain and pleasure, right? And if we can help them solve these problems, if we can create an environment where they believe and trust us that we will solve these problems, we're going to close more sales when we get to the presentation, the solution, and the closing of the deal. We want to identify their problem. We want to identify what they think is their problem, and then we want to identify what we think is the actual problem, because these are not always the same thing. Sometimes they are, but not always. Why? Because we tend to have more knowledge than they do about the specifics of what's going on with the building envelope. They may think their problem is in one area, but the building physics don't actually justify that, and the problem's actually coming from another area. So we want to identify that problem so that we can then put all of this together and figure out if they are a good fit to do business with, right? If they're looking for something that we don't provide, if we've never done an injection job, and that's what they're looking for is some form of an injection job, we probably want to realize that that's not a good fit for us unless we have access to a resource that can come in and help us understand this new project, this new type of project, this new way of doing things that we've never done before. Or we run the risk of learning a new trade hands-on, even though it still uses foam, even though it still uses the same equipment, we're going to take a risk doing something we've never done and see what happens, right? Where do we want to be in this process? So we have to answer the question, are they a good fit? And then we have to provide a solution. And if they're not a good fit, the solution might be telling them, hey guys, we're not a good fit. This isn't what we're best at. However, because we have a great network, we know this is a good referral for you to reach out to. Or maybe we reach out and create some form of opportunity where we share the lead with somebody and we're actually able to profit from a lead if they close the deal. Maybe that's something that you can do in your business. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, a lot of different opportunities for dealing with prospects and customers along the way. And when it gets time for the solution, you're presenting an offer, right? You're making the pitch in such a way that you're tying what they want, what they need, what their expectations are into what you can do. And then you want to put a call to action forth that allows them to actually make a buying decision, that gives them a reason to say yes, or gives them an opportunity to say yes. And then you have to deal with any objections, right? This is one of the more challenging parts of the sales process. This is where they start to fire objections at you. This is where you start to get peppered with different questions along the way. It might happen in the evaluation phase, but definitely when you start getting into the close, into the solution phase, you're going to start getting questions. So you have to figure out the best way for you to handle objections. So one of the best methodologies is actually identifying what objections your business faces most often, and then create a workshop internally to discuss what's the response to these objections. How do we overcome these objections internally? Create an internal form so that you know how your team is supposed to respond to these objections, so that you can create a looping pattern. What do I mean by looping? So what happens is you give your solution, you make your offer, you present the call to action, they give you an objection. You go back to your, hopefully what you know is a memorized response for that objection. You give them that response for their objection, and then you loop back in to another portion of your offer with a call to action. So you're using this process to overcome objections, giving them an answer, and then going back into a solution. So that you don't just, I've made this mistake many, many times where I give my pitch, they give me an objection, I answer the objection, and that's it. And the conversation starts to die. Well, that's why we introduced this concept of looping, because I can answer the objection and then go back into another portion of the offer and complete that call to action again. And it might sound very similar, but I'll add another wrinkle here, I'll add another feature, I'll add another benefit, I'll add a component here that I haven't already included in the initial offer, because I didn't want to overwhelm them in the initial offer. So I'll add a component the second time around, or the third time around, or the fourth time around. However many times it takes to get them to a point where they have no more objections. So now we have a customer, they have said yes, they are on board. Your job is not over. Your job for the customer has just begun, because it's time to serve that customer, right? You have to figure out the best way to work with them. So you have to have an onboarding process that brings new customers into the business, right? You transition them from the sales team now to the production team, and you want to figure out the best ways in your business, the way you work, your personnel, your assets in place, how to wow those customers. Because the wow factor, that is what gets you referrals. Referrals come when you win business from customers and you do such a great job that they can't stop talking about you. That's how others find out about you without you even asking. Now, you should have a process in here where you ask for customers, where you ask for referrals, but you will get referrals without even asking if you wow your customers. And then you have a nurturing process, right? Especially for prospects that buy from you often and spend the most money with you. If they're doing repeat business over a long period of time, you have to stay connected. You have to continue to give them free information. Here's something we just got from SPFA. Here's a video that you might find interesting on spray foam. It affects your properties. It affects the type of work you do. Not because they have a project available right now, but because you care about that customer. You want them to be thinking about you the next time they have a project. And this is relatively easy to do as long as you have a process that guides you to doing this. And this can be done by marketing personnel, or it can be done by the sales team, or it can be done by a combination of both. But you have to define your internal process for how this is done if you want to make sure it's done. Otherwise, it often gets skipped. So this is what the sales process looks like overall. Prospect, reach out, evaluate, solution, and serve. These are the 5 steps to the sales process that I teach my clients. One other component I will add is scripting. And when I say scripts, you're not going to be able to script every word of every conversation for every interaction you might have. But going back to the beginning of the sales process, you should have intro scripts for the introduction phase, right? What's the importance of that? Well, you want to have a certain path of logic that your team is using when they have these initial interactions and initial discussions. When you get into the evaluation phase, you want to have at least some form or guide of what are the 6 to 10 most important questions that we need to know to be able to help this client. Well, you can fit that into some form of a script. Maybe it's not exactly a script. Maybe it's just a pattern of questions that help you determine the best ways to help your customers. But if you can use this information, this concept, scripting to help your team practice and get better, you will make better salesmen and have a better sales team down the road, which will lead to more business. Bonus training, it is SPFwebinar.com is a bonus link for training that you can get from my website, SPFwebinar.com. This is my real contact information. I did get that right. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, if you want to talk about the sales process or any other component of the spray foam business. I am a trainer, consultant, and I do coaching and consulting on a regular basis for manufacturers and contractors. If I can help you out in any way, let me know. Feel free to take a photo or write down my contact information. Do we have any questions about any of the stuff that I have talked about? Yes, thank you.
Where do you fit financing into this?
That is a good question. So discussion of financing would probably have to come at the presentation. Like if you have the capability of offering financing, then the offer, and really you might be able to have a really strong call to action and close there because you can actually lay out multiple options. This is what you can do if you want to pay cash for it. This is what you want to do if you have X down.
At the same time that you offer the work scope, or
it depends. So my opinion on how presentations are made is counter to the way most businesses make presentations. Most businesses, when it's time for the presentation, they put the scope of work in front of the client and they go down the list of the scope of work. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then they have a price at the end of it. And that's their presentation. That's what most companies do for their presentation. I don't like that because it doesn't tie in the emotion and the logic that the buyer's going to use to make that decision. So the way I like to do it is I like to start with what we learned in the evaluation phase when we asked all those questions. Use their language and share it right back at them. You told us you were concerned about indoor air quality because Timmy has asthma and breathing conditions. We understand. We have worked on projects like this before. This is our best solution. We provide a building envelope package that provides, now you give them benefits. Air sealing, air tightness, ductwork and conditioned space, keeping the exterior environment separate from the interior environment, and limit that to 2 or 3 bullet points. And then you tie that into the way we do this is now, here is the scope of work. These are the things we do to get these benefits. Here is our close. And in that close, you can package different offers, right? You can package an all-cash offer versus financing offer versus other opportunities like that. And maybe even you learn as you develop your own process, because you have financing capability, you learn in the evaluation phase. Are you planning on paying all cash for this, or do you need financing? What type of, how is this going to affect your buying decision? Because this is a value that you offer that other competitors probably don't offer. And so then maybe you already know the answer to how they're going to pay for it before you get to the close. And so you have the primary method that you expect them to choose with maybe a backup method next to it if they want to change their mind.
Robert, it's common in Asia where people want 5-star services and yet they are willing to pay for 2-star price. It's very common.
Yes.
And one of the very clear example will be food services analyzed compared with budgets. So what will be your experience advice that should we take the 2-star price and offer 3-star services and compromise a little bit of the services, or we just walk away? I mean, your wisdom is needed here.
Oh, this is tricky. So the question was from Asia. Oftentimes in Asia, customers want 5-star service for 2-star pricing. And so what do you do in that situation? So that's a tough one because you get into some very unique dynamics. So you can only really offer customers 3 things, right? Your offer to a customer is going to be quality, service, and price, right? That's pretty much the only 3 things that you have to offer to a customer. Now, when I've had this situation in the past, I go into this conversation. I'm like, yes, Mr. Customer, I understand you want the best service, but you have a limited budget. This is how my business works. I can offer you these 3 things. If you want to pay less, which one of these do you want to give up? Right? Do you want to give up quality? Do you want the quality to be suspect, or do you want less service? Right? If you're not willing to give up one of these, I can't take a lower price because my price is predicated on the fact that I'm giving you my expected quality, which is I expect to be better than everybody else, but I also have this level of service. This is how I do business. If you want something different, we have to change this conversation. And then I put it back on them. Would you like to pay less and get less service? Or do you want to pay my standard rate and get the service that we offer to the market?
But the tricky part that from my experience, then the customer may say, okay, I pay 2-star price and you give them less service. And they go and tell the world that, God, this company sucks because they never have service. Without telling referrals that they only pay 2-star price. And we are stuck in that manner.
So when I say give them less service, I don't want to compromise, the integrity of my company or what I do in such a way that it affects my reputation in the marketplace, right? So I'm not willing to do that. If that's the case, if they want a situation where it's going to lead to problems, then I'd rather just walk away from the job. I'd rather just not close that deal and go actually stop dealing with this person that's not in my target market and go find somebody that is in my target market, right? But if I can, for example, let me think. What's a good example of this? If it's hard to come up with a good example. How could I take away service and
cheaper product?
And lower price?
If they're calling you for
Walk
spray
away.
foam and it's an air quality
Walk away.
project, you could do an air sealing with a blow on top.
Right.
Rather than doing a blow test.
Right. And so in my opinion, that's not necessarily changing service. That's changing quality. Right? So by offering a different, it changes the price point because you're changing the quality of the offer. Right? If quality, service, and price are the 3 things you're offering, if I'm having a conversation about spray foam, well, I'm having this conversation because it is the highest quality product I offer. It's the highest quality system I offer. If they want to lower the price, then yes, you can lower the quality of what you're offering by changing the product. And I guess service might be working, if I'm working with a builder and I have multiple rigs and I'm selling him on the fact that I can be there anytime to meet any demand whenever he wants. We're trying to offer 5-star service, but he's pushing back. Well, if he wants a lower price, then I can't commit that I can be there whenever he wants me to at any point in time on any job. Like that would be maybe an example of where he's going to get less service if he wants, if he wants to pay a lower price.
What I do a lot of times is if they're offering that or kind of price gouging kind of deal or giving many quotes, if they want to lower the cost down, obviously I go in and I tape off all the outlets, cancel off windows and doors, plastic windows. If they want to take off the cost at that point, I let them make that offer if they want to take care of all the prep work. If it's up to code wise, if I have to do a little, here and there, a couple staples, it's one thing, but I can kind of eliminate all that in the cost on my equation.
Right.
And then I'm just going and doing the job and getting out.
Yeah, so that's a great
example.
That's a good example. So he has a caulk and seal package that he adds as part of his bid, and if they don't want to pay the full price, then they can go do this themselves and he could take that, he can lower his service there. Or I've also heard, I'm not a big fan of this, but if an ignition barrier or thermal barrier coating, if an intumescent coating needs to go over the foam and they don't want to pay to have you do it, then they may want to take on the responsibility of having that painted. Well, that would be an example of lowering service for a price point. I don't recommend that. That's something, in my opinion, the spray foam contractor needs to be doing, in my opinion, because that is a tested system, and having it installed by two different parties, creates a problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was gonna say, we've done that in our history on occasion. Only problem I find with that is more often than not, you end up shooting yourself in the foot that way. Because the customer doesn't know what you know as an
Right.
installer.
Correct.
So you either end up, because you don't wanna have to go back and clean up a window or whatever, you either end up coming back and repairing, or you end up doing the fix right. And so
Right.
what are you gaining in the end?
Yeah.
That's the only drawback to that.
At the end of the day, if the conversation comes back to price, in my opinion, I've failed somewhere in the sales process. Now, granted, price and numbers are always important, but if their primary takeaway is you're a couple $100 more than somebody else, then I've failed my job. I haven't done my job right. Because if I've done my job right with my estimate, then I need this money to cover materials, to cover my labor, to cover my overhead. I said that slow so everybody could hear it. Overhead, because too many people are not charging enough for overhead in this business. And then what's the last thing I have to make? Profit, right? So I need to cover these four things. If they want to pay me less money, which one of these am I not going to get paid, right? So if I've done my job right on the estimate, then my number is pretty good. And if they don't want to pay that number because of a price discussion, then I've failed somewhere in the value conversation. They don't see enough value in what I'm offering to pay the price that I'm requesting. Hopefully, I have created value by separating myself from everybody else. Because if I were in your shoes, I don't want to be Joe Spray Foam with a truck and a trailer, right? I want to be a performance contractor that solves building envelope solutions. I want to be a performance contractor that is bigger, more than just a spray foam guy or an insulation guy. Now, this goes kind of down the rabbit hole, but if a building envelope does four things, it has to have bulk water protection, it has to have an air barrier, it has to have insulation, and it has to have a vapor retarder. Four different things that a building envelope has to do in that order. Bulk, liquid, air, insulation. If you're just an insulation guy, where do you fit? You're number 3 on the list. Bulk water is more important than you. Air is more important to you. Insulation is number 3 on the list. I don't want to be number 3 on the list. I want to be a building envelope expert. I want to be a solutions provider for the building envelope so that I can help them understand all 4 of these components. And more often than not, when we do our job, we're providing multiple benefits from this list in a single application. So we want to be able to have those conversations and not be pigeonholed as an insulation guy. If we get pigeonholed as an insulation guy, then the conversation is about commodities. And I'm not a commodity. Because if you're working with me, you're getting more than just basic level of competence and installation. Any other questions? I'm not really that good, guys. I'm sure there are other questions. But you don't have to ask me right now. If you want this presentation, I recorded it. I'm going to lay an audio over the slides. I will happily send it out to you, the recorded version with audio. If you sign up, come and sign up on this sheet here. Notice what I did there? I offered you value in exchange for your contact information. So maybe you will decide you want to talk to me in the future. But if you want a copy of the presentation with my audio, come and sign up here. I'll be up here to answer any questions that you might have, and I will be on the show floor as well today if you want to talk. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.